Iron Bottom Sound, October 1942. A PT boat cuts its engines and drifts in the black water.
The crew is holding their breath. 800 yards away, a dark shape is moving against the shoreline, a Japanese supply barge.
The torpedo man kicks the lever on the Mark 8 tube. Fire 1.
Whoosh! Splash. A trail of white phosphorus bubbles cuts a straight line through the dark water. The crew counts the seconds. 10, 15. They brace for the explosion. They wait for the fire.
They wait for fire.
Nothing. No boom. No fire. Just the sound of the wake dissolving into the night.
It passed under the target. To understand why this mattered, you have to look at the logistics of Guadalcanal. The Japanese were losing the daylight war, so they invented the Tokyo Express. But by October, even the destroyers were too vulnerable, so they switched to the Daihatsu-class barges.
These weren't just rafts. They were 50-foot steel-hulled landing craft, powered by diesel engines, usually lashed together in long columns, low in the water, hard to see, hard to hit.
And they were bleeding the U.S. Marines dry. Every night, this ant transportation system was delivering up to 900 fresh troops and tons of rice and ammunition to the Japanese garrison.
Think about the math. In a single month, they landed over 15,000 men right under our noses. While the Marines were starving and counting their bullets, the Japanese were getting stronger every night.
The destroyers couldn't stop them. The water in the straits was too shallow, and the reefs were too treacherous. The PT boats were the only thing standing between the Japanese army and a fully resupplied counteroffensive.
But asking a PT boat to stop that flow with a defective torpedo was like trying to stop a freight train with a slingshot. We were out there every night, watching the enemy reinforce, knowing our best weapon was useless.
If the barges got through, Guadalcanal would fall. It was that simple. The Mosquito fleet had to stop them, or the Marines on the beach were dead men.
It was a failure of mathematics. The primary weapon of a PT boat was the Mark 8 torpedo. It was designed to run at a depth of 10 feet to hit the keel of a destroyer. But a Japanese barge? It's a flat-bottomed raft. It draws maybe 5 feet of water.
You can see the geometry of the disaster. The torpedoes were running 5 feet below the targets. They were perfectly aimed shots that hit absolutely nothing.
So the crews tried to use their guns, the twin 50 calibers, but the Japanese had armored the barges with steel plates. The 50s just sparked off the sides like hail on a tin roof.
In October alone, 6 boats were lost, 17 sailors killed.
Mathematically, they were fighting the wrong war.
The reports went up the chain of command. The torpedoes run too deep. The guns are too light.
And the Bureau of Ordnance sent back the same answer they always did. The equipment is calibrated correctly. You're firing wrong.
The institutional blindness was total. The engineers in Washington looked at their blueprints and saw a perfect weapon system.
The men in the Solomons looked at the water and saw their friends dying for nothing. The system said it worked. Reality said it didn't.
The solution didn't come from an admiral. It didn't come from a laboratory. It came from a muddy airfield on Guadalcanal called Henderson Field.
The PT crews were desperate. They started scavenging the island, looking for anything that could punch a hole in steel. They walked past the wrecked airplanes, the graveyard of P-39 Airacobras that had been shot down or strafed on the runway.
One enterprising boat captain, or maybe it was a mechanic, history isn't clear, stopped and looked at the nose of a wrecked P-39.
He didn't see a plane. He saw a cannon.
The P-39 was built around the Oldsmobile M4 37mm autocannon. It fired a high-explosive shell at 150 rounds per minute.
It fed from a 30-round horseshoe magazine. It weighed 280 pounds. It was designed to be bolted to the frame of an all-metal fighter plane.
It was never designed to be mounted on the swaying wooden deck of a boat. There was no manual for this. There was no official approval.
They dragged the cannon out of the wreck. They welded a rusted pipe to the bottom to make a swivel mount. They bolted it to the foredeck of a PT boat using scraps of angle iron and prayer.
The engineers would have had a heart attack. They knew the deck stress calculations.
The logic was simple. Either it would punch through the Japanese steel, or the recoil would rip the plywood deck right off the boat.
Now, consider the platform they were deciding to bolt this cannon to. The PT boat is a paradox. It is the fastest ship in the Navy, but it is also the most fragile. Step on board. The first thing that hits you is the vibration. You are standing on top of 3 Packard 4M 2500 V12 engines. That's 4,500 horsepower packed into a plywood box. When they idle, the deck plates rattle against your boots. When they open up, the entire boat screams. The hull isn't steel armor. It's a double layer of mahogany planking, barely an inch thick. It's essentially a high-speed piece of furniture holding 3,000 gallons of 100-octane aviation gasoline.
And the smell. God, the smell. It's a mix of hot oil, salt spray, and the sweet, stinging fumes of that high-grade gas. In the tropical heat of the Solomons, the air hangs heavy. It sticks to your skin. You are constantly aware that you are riding a floating bomb. So when they decided to mount a 280-pound aircraft cannon on the foredeck, the risk wasn't just about weight. It was about structural integrity. Every time that 37mm cannon fires, it sends a massive recoil shockwave straight down into the wooden frame. You're shaking a boat that is already vibrating itself to pieces. You're creating sparks inches away from fuel lines that are leaking fumes. The engineers said the recoil would snap the keel. They said the muzzle flash would ignite the vapors. It was a gamble with physics. One cracked fuel line, one loose spark from the breach, and the barge busters wouldn't just sink, they would vaporize. Night patrol. The modified boat slips back into iron-bottom sound. The engine mufflers are bubbling underwater. The crew is silent. But this time, they aren't lining up for a torpedo shot. The gunner is strapped into the makeshift chair on the bow, his hands sweating on the spade grips of the 37mm. 800 yards. A barred shadow appears. Steady. Wait for it. The captain gives the order. Open fire. Thump, thump, thump. The boat shudders violently with every round. The smell of cordite floods the cockpit. The tracers arc across the water. And this time, there is no spark. There is no bounce. The 37mm high-explosive shells smash through the barge's armor plating like it's wet cardboard. 12 seconds. That's all it takes. The first barge erupts into flames. The ammo inside cooks off. Then the second barge. 90 rounds fired. 2 targets destroyed.
0 American casualties.
The weapon worked.
The results were immediate and undeniable. In the next 8 patrols, the modified boats destroyed 14 Japanese barges.
Operational effectiveness went up 600%. Casualties dropped by 60%.
The PT busters had changed the math. They stopped trying to sink rafts with complex torpedoes and started smashing them with brute force. They turned the Tokyo Express into a nightly slaughter. The Bureau of Ordnance couldn't ignore the kill counts. They sent inspectors to Guadalcanal. They saw the rusted, welded, scavenged cannons bolted to the decks.
And for once, the bureaucracy folded. They didn't arrest the crews, they copied them.
The Navy formalized the modification. Factories started producing official mounts. By the end of the war, over 1,500 37mm cannons were installed on PT boats across the Pacific.
The system adapted, but only because a few greasy mechanics in the jungle proved them wrong first.
The PT boat crews proved that when the Navy's weapons fail, you don't write a memo, you steal a cannon from a wrecked fighter plane and bolt it to your deck.
It wasn't pretty, it wasn't regulation, but it worked. And in the Solomons, working is the only metric that matters.
If you respect that kind of ingenuity, the kind that ignores the manual to get the job done, then you're in the right place.
Join the Legion. Subscribe. Because the history books miss the grease and the grit. We don't.
The PT crews found a way around their broken torpedoes, but the submarine crews, they weren't so lucky. They faced a defective weapon that didn't just miss, it hunted them down.
If you want to see the darker side of Navy ordnance, the story of a torpedo that killed its own inventors, you need to open the Mark 14 scandal file.
Click right here to see why the perfect weapon became the US Navy's worst nightmare.
Dismissed.